Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. Today it is time to take the first major harvest from this jalapeno tower. We've been harvesting peppers here and there as we need them, to chop up in tacos or when I need a jalapeno or a couple jalapenos for cooking something. But today we are going to harvest all of the peppers that are of a reasonable size in this tower here. I want to go ahead and take a big harvest now because that's going to encourage these plants, rather than focusing on ripening these peppers to red, it's going to encourage these plants to send out more flowers and ultimately to produce more peppers. By doing it, I want to make sure that I do this early enough in the season that we have time to get a second flush of peppers before the growing season ends. So you can see that there are lots of peppers to harvest on this green stalk here. We've got lots of jalapenos. So I'm going to keep, little peppers like this we're not going to harvest. But any peppers that are reasonable sized or that have these cracks in them, usually these cracks mean that they are pretty much done growing at that point. So we can go ahead and harvest any of those. So while we're talking about this pepper green stalk, I do want to mention that I'm really happy with the results. I know it was a little bit of an experiment this year to plant this almost completely out in pepper plants. Last year we planted this in every other pocket with peppers and the opposite or the alternating pockets with basil, which I think worked well, but I wanted to see if we can push this even more to the limits. And so I planted the whole thing out with peppers except for the bottom tier where I still planted basil there. And I don't think the peppers have suffered at all being planted this closely. I think that I will do the same thing next year. I may even fill the bottom tier with peppers next year and pack even a few more peppers into this small space. So you'll notice that throughout the tower here, a few random peppers have turned red. That is normal. Most jalapenos will ripen to red if they're left on the plant long enough. I don't have a problem with them being ripened. Over here you can see there's another one. They still work perfectly well ripe. They get a little bit sweeter, some people say a little bit hotter. Even though jalapenos are most commonly used green, there's of course nothing wrong with the red ripe ones, and some people, or for some specific dishes, you may prefer to have the ripe ones. The reason that I am planning to harvest these green before they ripen is because I will get a larger overall harvest by harvesting them now and allowing the plants to produce more peppers rather than waiting for them to ripen. We have 4 varieties of jalapenos here, 3 spicy varieties and 1 that is not spicy called the Notapino. The 3 spicy varieties I'm just going to mix together and stick all in one bowl. And I have a separate smaller bowl that I'm going to use here for the Notapino varieties because I do want to have the non-spicy peppers separated out. Now when it comes to preserving these today, what I'm planning to do with this batch is very, very simple. I'm planning to just chop these up and freeze them. I think that with the amount that we're harvesting today, I'll reserve a few to use for salsa because I do want to make a batch of delicious salsa later today with some tomatoes that I have ready. But aside from those, I think that I am going to take the majority of them at least the spicy ones. I'll have to think about it a little bit. But I'm planning on taking the spicy ones and just chopping them up and freezing them. Peppers are really easy to freeze because you don't have to blanch them, nothing like that. So I can just chop them up and stick them in a freezer bag in my freezer, and then I can pull them out as needed throughout the year for cooking. You can preserve sweet peppers exactly the same way, and that's the way I preserve the majority of them. Now when it comes to jalapenos, I do also like to make pickled jalapenos. I'll can those. And sometimes at the end of the season, if I just have some stragglers, I'll make a quick refrigerator pickle jar, stick it in the fridge, and that will last for a month or 2. The other way that I like to preserve jalapenos is making cowboy candy, which is basically pickled candied jalapenos, and those are really delicious too. I do still have jars of pickled jalapenos and jars of cowboy candy left from last year, which is why I'm prioritizing freezing. With the second flush of peppers, I will say though, one of the reasons that I decided to grow the Notapino this year was because I wanted to make some cowboy candy that was a little bit milder by mixing some of the spicy jalapenos with the Notapinos. But I think that will wait for our second harvest of peppers. For today, we're going to focus on freezing. So I'm just going to go through and find all the Notapinos first and put them in this little bowl. Hopefully this bowl isn't too loud on the video. I know it's a little bit jangly. So I'm going to go through and find all the Notapinos first and put them in this small bowl. Then I'll put all the mix of the hot jalapeno varieties in here. I'll meet you back here when I'm done harvesting and show you what we got. So I got this little bowl of nadapinos. I did find that the nadapinos seemed like they maybe take a little bit longer. A lot of them were smaller and didn't seem fully developed yet, but we did get still quite a few. And then I got this bowl of, this is a mix of Jalafuego, early jalapeno, and Craig's Grande. I will say, I wasn't very scientific about this, but the Jalafuego out of the three easily yielded the most and had very large peppers. So while I do like all three of those varieties, Jalafuego is probably the best performing. So we're going to take these into the house. This is a lot, and I don't think I necessarily want to freeze all of these. I think this isn't a huge harvest, but I think it's more than I want to just go ahead and freeze. So I'll set aside a couple for salsa, and then I'm going to weigh the rest and see if there's enough for me to make maybe a half batch of cowboy candy with a mix of nadapinos and the spicy jalapenos. There are more jalapenos out here that I could harvest if it isn't quite enough. There were some that were not quite full grown and I wanted to let them get a little bit larger, but I can go ahead and harvest those if I need just a little bit more to get the right amount to can a small batch of cowboy candy. So with all the jalapenos that we got, they total a little over 3 pounds. So I looked it up, and the cowboy canning recipe calls for 4 pounds of jalapenos. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make about half. I'll probably go pick a couple more peppers. I think I'll maybe make half to 3/4 of that recipe and use all of the nadapinos in that. And then I'll save the extra of these jalapenos. I'm going to chop those up and freeze them. Now I do have a more comprehensive tutorial of how to make cowboy candy that I posted maybe a year or two ago. I can't remember exactly when. I'll go ahead and link that in the video description in case you want to see more of a step-by-step how-to guide. But I'm just going to go ahead and make up a batch of cowboy candy, and I'll show you what we're going to do with the rest of the jalapenos. It's a good thing I went out and looked because I found this entire bowl more. Some of these are smaller nadapinos that I harvested a little bit early for this purpose, but there's also some full-size peppers of both nadapinos and the spicy varieties as well. So I'm just going to see how much these new peppers weigh. We'll zero out the weight of our bowl. Add these in. So just over 8 ounces of additional peppers. Here from the bowl of the hot peppers, I'm just going to choose, say, 5 peppers to set aside for our salsa. And then we'll go ahead and re-weigh what we have left. You know, I think actually I'm just going to weigh these peppers that I took out and subtract that weight from the total. So we had a total of 3 pounds 10 ounces before. This is about 5 ounces of peppers I'm taking out. So now we have 3 pounds 5 ounces remaining. And let me figure out what I'm going to put in the cowboy candy. So I figured out what we're going to do. These are set aside for salsa. These are the peppers that we're going to freeze. And then all of these here add up to 2 pounds, which is enough for half a batch of cowboy candy. So now that I figured out what I'm doing, I don't need to keep the varieties separate anymore. I'm just going to combine them all into this one bowl here. So this is for cowboy candy. We'll set these aside and get working on our peppers for freezing. So because this is a fair amount of jalapenos, I don't feel like chopping these by hand. We're going to make things easy and use the food processor, which as you can see is on life support, but it'll still do this job completely fine. So I'm sure many of you will think this is a little overly cautious of me, but when I'm chopping jalapenos, I always wear safety glasses. One time I did get a drop of jalapeno juice that flew directly into my eye, and that was something that I never want to repeat that experience. So ever since then, I wear these, and it has not happened since. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove the stem, basically chop these in half, and remove at least some of the seeds just to make the food processor job a little bit easier. Removing the seeds is personal preference. You can leave them in or take them out. I don't always remove them. Honestly, I don't think it makes as much of a difference as people say when it comes to the heat level. That's personal preference. Your experience may vary. I just don't really like the texture of pepper seeds. So I'm going to go ahead and remove at least most of them. Now, normally, if I was going to be chopping this many peppers by hand, I would definitely wear gloves because I have also had that experience where you're chopping peppers and at the end of the day, your hands burn. And so if you've experienced that, you know what I'm talking about and you feel my pain. If you have not, then just be very thankful. Because I am just removing the stems and quickly slipping out the seeds, I think that I can do this I can do it really quickly without having to touch the inside of the jalapeno too much. Just pop it in the food processor. Yep, and then we'll let that do the rest of the work. So as you can see, I changed my mind and decided to use gloves after all. I tested one of these peppers just by licking the stem end, and that was spicy. Last year our jalapenos were really hot. I'm not sure why, but they were just hotter than they'd ever been before. And based on that little test, I'm thinking the same might be true this year. So thank goodness for the jalapenos. That'll tone my cowboy candy down a little bit. If you like really spicy food, you probably want to leave those out. But I'm adding the jalapenos in. We'll keep with the jalapeno flavor from the jalapenos, but just, tone down the spice a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and de-seed these and pop them right in here. So here you can see that we got the food processor really full of peppers. Now, the reason I'm using the food processor is because when I chop jalapenos, I usually chop them really finely anyway. I wouldn't use this same method for something like bell peppers because I usually leave those in a little bit larger pieces. Now we'll just stick the top on this, and I'm just going to pulse this a little bit. I don't want to puree these. I just want them to be fairly finely chopped. So this is what they look like at the moment. I'm just going to give them a little stir because I want to make sure that the larger pieces get to the bottom. So if it's really important to you that your pepper pieces are really uniformly chopped, this is not the way to do it. I'm not sure if this was really much of a time saver. I was thinking, originally my plan was to chop and freeze that entire batch of jalapenos, but it ended up being a little bit larger of a harvest than I planned on. So with this amount of jalapenos that I'm chopping, it might have been, honestly, not much. It wouldn't have taken much longer, I think, to hand chop them. But, we're invested at this point, so we're going to just finish this up. So I'm going to stop this here. This is pretty much how fine I like it to be chopped, and I think if I go much more, it's going to start pureeing the jalapenos, which is not what I want. So I just prepared a Ziploc baggie here, labeled it, and put the date on it. I'm just going to stick all these chopped peppers into the bag and pop it in the freezer, and that is exactly how simple it is. So thank you so much for harvesting and hanging out in the kitchen with me. We got this whole nice full bag of chopped jalapenos that I'm going to stick in the freezer. Plus we have this bowl destined to become cowboy candy and some extra jalapenos set aside to become roasted salsa. As I mentioned before, if you're interested in seeing how to make cowboy candy, I will link my video of making that in the video description, so feel free to check that out if you're looking for more options for preserving jalapenos. I think I may have a video on pickling jalapenos as well. If I do, I'll go ahead and link that in the video description too. So let me know your favorite ways to preserve jalapenos, other hot peppers, and other peppers from the garden. I hope you're having a great day, and I can't wait to see you soon. I'll see you next time.